The following panel discussion was recorded live at the Huntington Beach Art Center on May 25th, 2024, and features artists from the Rasquachismo exhibition that was on view from April 6th to June 1st, 2024.
So thank you so much for coming on a holiday weekend. Really appreciate your being here. This is our artist talk for the exhibited artists for Rasquachismo, which is an exhibition that was curated by Laura Black. And I just came on board in my new role as director of the Art Center, and very luckily for me, this show is already in the works, and I couldn't have been happier to be able to exhibit these artists. I think that the show really encapsulates what we do here at the Huntington Beach Art Center. It supports local artists, it shows a variety of different art modalities, art mediums, and it also has shows sort of the influence of traditional arts and cultural practices in contemporary art, which I think is another value of the Art Center. So I want to turn it over to Rudy Baramont here and introduce the artists that exhibited in Rasquachismo. So thank you all again.
Thank you. So hello and welcome. My name is Rudy Baramont. I'm the curator assistant here at Huntington Beach Art Center. And let's introduce our artists, José M. Flores, Aaron Moctezuma, Juliana Rico, and Alicia Villegas-Rolon. Welcome. Looking forward to this conversation, as this show has been a very special one to me as well. Let's start by going around and introduce yourselves and tell us about your medium and your art and background as well. Of course, sure. You may start. You're sitting.
Hi everybody, I'm Alicia Rolon, Chicana artist. I'm an oil painter. I do portraits, figures. As far as my medium and what I do, the themes I explore have to do with, growing up Mexican American, Chicana. I embed that into my work. During the day, I'm a high school art teacher, and a lot of my time is spent thinking in that mode as a teacher and an educator. When I do get to paint, when I do get to work, that's in the summers or on the weekends, and that's when I get a chance to get into the studio and sort of turn off the world and just kind of work on my own stuff.
Hi everyone, my name is Juliana Rico, and I am an artist that predominantly works in photography, although I oftentimes use other media such as video and sometimes some installation work to complement my practices. Oftentimes my work is dealing with the topics of identity, and sometimes that has to do with my cultural identity, sometimes that has to do just with the body that I exist in as a woman, and with my work, I would say it's very much springs from things that I'm personally navigating and trying to question for myself. Sometimes I think about my work in the context of, putting my money where my mouth is. I think certain things, I have certain ideological practices that sound great in theory, and oftentimes my work is me trying to internalize that and feel it more within my body and feel that actual idea come through myself. In addition to my artist practice, I am also an educator. I am the program head at Pasadena City College for their photography department. And so education is incredibly important to me as well as giving students a platform and a way to express their own voices and their own stories. And so I try to do that through my artwork and then teach the next generation of artists how to do that for themselves as well.
Thank you.
My name is Aaron Moctezuma. My medium is mostly photography. I have started a little bit in videography as well. Where I tend to focus on a lot of the lowrider aspect of this culture. It wasn't really anything to like show off anything in particular. I'm just always at the shows, and I kind of just grew up with it. So through my other jobs and everything that I've done, it's just been part of my world, and it never really started as anything that I wanted to like show off. It just kind of happened that way, right? Through the push of a professor of mine. So that's kind of where I ended up, and yeah.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Hello, my name is José Flores Nava. My primary medium is ceramics, and just like two other panelists here as well. I'm an educator, so I'm an artist and educator. Where summertime is our time to make work, so I'm super excited for that. But working with ceramics, that's the main thing that I've been focusing on for several years now, even though I do dabble into like other mediums depending on the topic and content of like things that I've been trying to do. As of lately, like the last 4 years or so, I've just been really focusing on a lot of like Chicanx and Latinx like culture and art as well too, so my work just got very bright and colorful. In part was just out of necessity, just what I had materials around, but also to just, it's a very cultural thing where I just decided to kind of really hold on to color and something that makes me happy.
Well, it made us happy too. So some questions are for all of you. Rasquachismo touches on the idea of transformation. How does your work speak to transformation, and how have you experienced transformation? Please.
For this series, I started this lowrider series during COVID, when we were kind of all shut in, and I found that it was a good time for me to paint because I could teach in the morning. I had the rest of the day to paint, and finding outlets, something to do that was outside of the house, was very limited until my husband decided to start to film lowrider car shows, and I would tag along and just take my camera and photograph. And to me, even in the midst of COVID, when we were all kind of shut in, there was still in my community this needing to be together, to be together and to be out, try to find a way to be social. And if you've ever been to a cruise or a car show, it's extraordinary to see the things that people can do with so little means, and to celebrate, not only our culture, but to celebrate the things that they've created, which is the lowrider, which is a quintessential Rasquachismo project. You make something from whatever you have. As far as transformation and my work is centered always in my culture, and I think the lowrider is an interesting object and symbol, in that it's like a very masculine kind of symbol. But in my work, I like to go beyond just that. It's not just the car. It's not just a car show. It's not just a cruise. It really is like a way to sort of pass on traditions and to keep on. I don't know what the words are, but to sort of pass on or hold tight to traditions. I don't know if that answers your question, but
It
sort of
totally does,
along
and
those
make
lines.
do with what you have. That was a big part of it.
Yeah, and even though I'm a very traditional painter, my work is, traditional paint, realistic painting. To me, I'm really fascinated, and I was fascinated at the time with trying to challenge myself in terms of trying to paint things that are beyond me, to really give the object in my painting and the people in my painting, this sort of careful attention, and I felt like if I did that, then I would raise them up to really be something that would catch people's eye.
Great,
Yeah.
thank you. Juliana?
Just as a comment of like what Alicia
Sure.
just said, I really love that what you just mentioned of, you know, this idea, and that's what art has that ability to do, right? Is that we're highlighting and documenting this community and showcasing the worth and the love and the pride and the value that this community puts into so many aspects of, in this case, like lowrider culture, but just aspects of life and identity. So yeah, I think that is really beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. In terms of my own work, I definitely see transformation being a huge aspect of that. As I mentioned just a little bit, you know, within the body of, within the project that I have here on display, the work is really investigating and interrogating myself and challenging myself for this like internal transformation. The work that's on display is a piece that's called Self-Decolonization, and it talks about and confronts my own internalized white supremacy that I have embedded within me just because of having grown up with it in the United States. Even as a person with Mexican ancestry, you know, Mexico was colonized by the Spanish in the 1500s. And so there is this element of colonization that goes deep even within the Latinx community. And for myself in this piece, I was really wanting to challenge my own ideologies and like spaces where I still held those biases, even if they were unintentional. And so within the performance, there was a lot of like reading and writing and processing and things that were happening before I did the performance to really like, again, interrogate myself and my own values and the ways that like I carry myself and act in the world. And so the performance itself was trying to be this encapsulation like of that transformation, of that trying to like rid myself of some of these layers of internalized like white supremacy that I have held, and yeah, trying to get back to a perspective that is inclusive of everyone, that is like forefronting indigeneity, and yeah, you know, as I mentioned a little before, like practicing these ideas in a deeper way, like in my body. And so, yeah, I really do feel like transformation is a big part of my work, but also like some of the growing pains of that transformation process, and shining a little bit of light on these areas that are not necessarily comfortable to accept about ourselves, to accept about myself, and yeah, hopes for that transformation to happen.
Great, thank you. That speaks to Rasquachismo being about sensibilities. It's not a style or form, it's just so tightly connected to your identity. Aaron?
I don't know if mine's gonna have such a wow factor. Yeah, no, so yeah, my work just revolves heavily around the artwork that goes into the vehicles, right? So if you notice a lot of my work, I try not to show off the car itself or the whole scene itself, but I try to focus on little bits and pieces of the car, and whether it be the panel with a painting on it, or just the tail lights of an Impala, which to me are my favorite. And like I really like to show that, like, hey, like this small little piece right here took a lot of work, but a lot of times it gets lost because of the whole car or because of the whole scene, or whatever it is, right? The steering wheel, like that color, it's not seen a lot, right? It's pretty rare. So I try to really focus on the bits, like the amount of work that goes into the small corners of each car, right? I've never built a car myself, but I did build a bike, a lowrider bike. It was on display at the Golden West Rasquachismo show, and that was a lot to go through, right? Because a bike is tiny compared to a car, but learning how to do the candy paint, learning how to get the chrome to look right, and then like really going into detail and like getting crazy about it. I tell people all the time, like, I want to repaint it, and I hate it already, because I'm like, it's got a scratch right there, but it just shows like how important these things are, right? How much care and how much work goes into this, and I guess, yeah, in a way, how much transformation.
Does the transformation of the vehicle do something to your transformation too as an artist, and or the community?
Yeah, it really makes me really picky. Like, if I wasn't before, I am a lot more now. But yeah, so that's I guess that's what I wanted to show, like how important every detail is about the car or whatever it is, right? And how it just helps transform it into something bigger and better.
Thank you. Jose?
Well, I think like for me, transformation was again out of necessity. And by that I mean like what I had available with me. Again, my work actually, like my recent work started during like the whole COVID thing, where all I had was a couple bags of clay, some plaster at home, a garage in my apartment that I can use, and maybe fire kiln once. So I got a friend's studio, and that's all I had. So I had to switch gears on what I was making, like that type of work that I was making, but then also just like being cooped up and kind of noticing how community, especially like the community where I was living, like was still thriving, like was still making do with what they had. Some people were like selling fruit outside, selling food outside, just to kind of, they weren't working, they weren't doing any of that. Then that kind of helped me realize, okay, this is something that I can work with. There's something that I can make with this as well too. Like, how do I become part of this change and this adjustment to what we're doing? So then I started creating vessels. I mean, in ceramics, vessel is like the primary thing that we mostly work with, but I started doing like utilitarian vessels, like buckets and bowls and stuff like that, that are usually, done by, they're like kind of mundane, they're very mundane objects, but I started using that more of a representation of a body. And then the color too, just all I had was house paint from Home Depot. So it was like one of the few stores that was open. So I would just like go to Home Depot and buy, the brightest, prettiest paint that I could afford. And then I started like deciding, I was like, why I need to work with color, because everything's still pretty bright out, in bleak moments. Things are still bright and fruitful, pun intended. But and then also too, like I think like I made the change of like really, I wasn't using color a whole lot. One, I was afraid of color, but also two, I think because of like going to school at the time that I went, and like in the last, I don't know, from undergrad to to my graduate school, color was always seen as like this, I don't know, kind of tacky, or sometimes like not so sought after, like still minimalism a lot of times was like pushed into us, and then at some point I had to be like, no, like, no, we have to change that. So then I kind of had to embrace myself too, like change those ideas that I had that my work had to be a certain way, to like, no, completely change and transform, the way that I thought about my work, the way that I thought about myself, the way that I thought about my artist work, as well as, even the community, like where I was living, and how to showcase that through the work, through the ceramic.
Beautiful. Transformation and evolution.
Okay.
So Rasquachismo and lowrider culture has a rebel spirit. How does rebelliousness resonate with your work?
I think anytime a person of color decides to use the arts to express stuff that can't be said in words or written, I think they are resisting, standing up for something. As far as my work, because I follow a tradition of painting that is, over 500 years old. I've asked myself this question, like, how does my work step out of that? And for me, it has to do with, I don't wake up in the morning and say, hey, I'm gonna make Chicano art today, because I'm Chicana, and to label and choose that is already a form of resistance. But as far as my work is what I know, what I experience, and what I see every day. But also, as an educator, and even as just a person who goes to a museum, even today, like, I walk around the museum and I'm very much attracted to old master paintings, but I never see myself, I never see my community, I never see anybody who looks like me in these kind of old master paintings, and so I'm seduced by that. I love that, and I think that's one of the things that drives me to make the work that I make. That I love this idea of using that language, like a Western kind of language, the tradition of painting, but to put it towards my own themes and my ideas and the things that I actually see every day.
Thank you. Juliana.
I think I definitely consider myself and have been put in the place of being like the rebel in my family. I have a pretty traditional family, fairly conservative, and so yeah, going into the arts even was considered a rebellious thing. As I was a first generation college student, and so my parents growing up just told me, like, go to college, get a job. That's how you succeed in this world. And so I went to college. I had originally intended to study biology with a direction towards pre-med to be a doctor. Why? That's a wild thing to remember. And, but yeah, I had already fallen in love with photography. I fell in love with photography in high school. And, but even at that point, it was like, knowing that that wasn't something that I could really fully embrace and be supported by my family in that decision. And so, yeah, I went to my undergraduate like with that major in mind, but after my first year, I was finding myself in my photo labs and not in the bio labs. And, I had to make the decision of, okay, I'm like, photography is for me, art is for me, like, that's my thing. And so making that decision and then telling my parents, and then them, really not understanding at all, not supporting at all. How are you going to get a job? How are you going to pay to survive? Like, what are you going to do? I think many artists get this question when they're deciding to go into the arts, but I think especially for people like the Latino community or people from who are immigrants or the children of immigrants, it's just not seen as practical. And but yeah, I did it. I did this thing that my parents like did not understand, did not agree with. But yeah, like decided like that was the thing. It didn't matter if they didn't understand. Like, I knew that that was for me and that I would make it work. And yeah, I kind of, continue that spirit within my artwork as well, of challenging these things that have been placed on us by society, have been placed on us by culture. And nudging back and saying like, but why? Why do we think this way? Why do I need to act this way? Why do I need to be representing myself in these types of capacities? And so, yeah, I think that my work leans into some of that rebellion, even though it's not always comfortable for me or for other people. I think it's been necessary for me to live in like what feels most genuine to who I am.
Thank you. Aaron.
Yeah, well, I mean, the whole lowrider culture is built on rebellion, right? Airbags were built as a way to kind of loop around the law because a car couldn't be so low. So airbags were made so that you can lift it up when a cop was around and they wouldn't pull you over, you know, and then the cop was gone, you drop it back down and you scrape. So this whole culture is just, you know, it's just built around it, right? Custom culture. It was a way to get a car, chop it up, and make it something different, you know? And like in my photos, I mean, I've been to car shows where like the police kick us out, where they'll be like, hey, it got, you know, we got kicked out, move over to this place over here, and we all run over there. Like even with photography, right? I mean, I grew up skating, so skating is all about rebellion too, right? Running away, jumping fences that we're not supposed to jump, and that's kind of where my photography started, and so it's just been a part of me and who I am, right? It's been part of my culture. It's been right, my family, and yeah, I think it's just so embedded in who we are that I didn't even realize it. Growing up a lot, I didn't realize this was not a good thing to do. Like, hey, maybe that no trespassing sign is there for a reason. But to us, it was like, no, but there's a spot right there. And the same thing with like lowriding, right? Like, hey, it was illegal in Santa Ana up until late last year, I believe. So, yeah, this whole culture, this who I am and who we are is just like, it's just meant to rebel, right? Because we're not meant to do these things, but we want to do them anyway, because it's how we express our things. It's how we get our outlets out there, right? So, yeah, it's just a part of me at this point, right? I'm in my 30s, and I got to stop myself and be like, hey, grown men don't do this. Yeah.
Thank you. Jose.
I mean, I don't know if I feel too rebellious or anything. I feel like I've always been like the goody two-shoe guy, and I just kind of like do whatever I want, and luckily I've been allowed to do that. I mean, even my like my mom was just like, oh, you do whatever you want, like you're paying for it, so you just do it, you know. I just figure everything out, but I mean, I think work-wise, maybe not so much like personal, but just like in my work, I do try to just kind of stay out of like the contents of just like traditional ceramics, even though I can go in that direction too. But lately I've been just trying to figure things out in a very non-traditional way, to step out of the box of like ceramics and make ceramics in a way that it's not as conservative, I guess, or as traditional, just because I feel like that puts me in the spot where I can, you know, be in shows like this one, that it's out of the norm of ceramics, that it's not just like utilitarian functional things, but just kind of like pushing it. That's the only way that I can see of me like kind of rebelling, you know, against like the ceramics establishment, you know, to put it, you know.
Do you encourage that in your students?
Oh, absolutely.
To,
Oh my God.
Rebel
Yeah.
against all the norms and.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like when I have students, oh yeah, actually yeah, I do. I guess I'm not that good of an influence, but like with my students, like I tell them, I'm like, hey, if you're taking art classes and they tell you, oh, don't make cute work, I tell them, I'm like, no, you make the cutest thing you possibly can. You just do it well. You just do it really, really well, so you shut up your professors, and you know, and they can't say anything about it, because you know, but it's like, make sure that you stay within tracks of what you're supposed to do, but just do it really well. I was like, you know, master your craftsmanship, and that's something that I actually had to do, and like I really tried to master my craftsmanship in ceramics just so that I can throw all of that away and be like, well, I can do that, but I don't have to. So I just kind of told myself the same thing, right? It's like,
Great.
no, you do what you want to make, but just,
So the next question is also for you, Jose. Your ceramic pieces mirror everyday objects. Can you tell us more about why you choose to recreate certain objects for display? You answered a part of it, but please go deeper inside.
Yeah, absolutely. So the vessels themselves, again, and this does tie with like the tradition of ceramics of like creating vessels. Because like when we think of ceramics, a lot of times we think of vessels, right? But then now making buckets, which I absolutely love making buckets. I love making mundane objects. So for like those mundane objects, the ways that I see them, it's almost as a representation of the human body. And a lot of times, like, yeah, they're pretty and everything, but there's fingerprints, there's finger marks, there's tool markings. They're not perfectly smooth or anything like that, and that's just kind of, again, like kind of going over like what the human body really looks like, and also just the human body as a vessel or a container. Whether you're religious or non-religious, like the body is still a container. Like we're still vessels. As far as the fruits and vegetables that I do, everything does tie into like the Latino community and also just to place. Strawberries are native to South and Central America. Potatoes as well too, the squash as well too. So everything that I do there does tie back to the land, to the people as well too. So there's squash, there's tomatoes, there's jalapenos. There's also the strawberries as well too. Bananas, obviously they're not, part of, like they're not native to the Americas, but they do have a big history in Central America, and they always, so every like thing that I make, same with the orange as well too. Even though like the orange and the banana, like they're not native to the Americas, like they still have a historical attachment to either Central America or even here to people of color in particular, especially when it comes to labor.
True, and they have this natural, I started thinking in my own native language when I saw your work. I thought, oh, this is like a bazaar I'm going to. It's not a market. They feel so real. Yeah, thank you. Aaron, your photographs point us to the intricate details of a moment in time, or an ornate styling hidden inside the car door. How do you choose what to reveal in your photographs?
I think at first, when I first started, it was anything that caught my eye. I would just kind of see like, oh, that's shiny. But as I've gone more and more into it, I've noticed certain things like, hey, that part is very hard to find, or that like airbrushing is ridiculously tough. These pinstriping, my hand goes like this all the time. So like, how does someone get it so straight? So I really like showing off those things that take a lot of effort, that take a lot of work to do. The engravings on the chrome, that's not cheap and it's not easy. I did candy paint on my own bike and it looks terrible. So when I see someone else do it, I'm like, how do you do it so perfectly? Like, I really look for these things and I like it. I've always been into cars, right, since I was a kid. And in certain cars, I just know like they have different features than others, right? So I look for those features, I look for those things, and it was never really a thing to like show it to someone else, to be like, hey, everyone else appreciate this. It was just me saying like, I appreciate that, and then people just recognized it. So.
Do you also document the process of creation, or like creating those details, and
I have in the past. I did one with this very famous artist, airbrusher. His name was Daddy D. He passed away a few years ago, but he airbrushed an entire truck bed, or the camper of the bed, and so I've done that before. Not too much into the actual details of the cars, but yeah, I've done it once or twice.
Okay. Juliana, your piece is so personal. How does it feel to put yourselves out there for observation and interpretation?
Terrifying, honestly. Yeah, it's really, yeah, it's terrifying. I want to demystify like this idea that just because an artist has like a bold perspective or is doing something vulnerable, that they're like, oh my God, you're so brave, like you must be fearless. That's not the case at all. In fact, I was just talking to the curator, Dan, right before this panel about the project that I'm currently getting ready to try to find a home for, and how it's been so challenging because it's so personal and so scary to me to put myself up there at these varying levels of vulnerability. And yeah, it's very much a process that gets a little bit easier, I think, once it has like its first showing, you know. But up until that point, like during the ideation, during the creation, during the even like editing and final touches, I am definitely afraid. And you know, I do the work because I think it's important, and it is important to me. Like I mentioned, to like do this thing that like I say I believe in. For me to like make it real and like say, okay, well, I believe in it, like let me practice. But yeah, it's really hard. And I think, but that's one of the things that I also tell my students as well, is when I'm feeling like scared, when I'm feeling nervous, like when you have that feeling of like, people are gonna see this. It's usually because that work is incredibly important to you. You're saying something personal. You're putting yourself out there in a way that you might experience rejection, and nobody likes rejection. But that in doing that, like ultimately you are empowering yourself, and that's what I continue to try to remember about myself within my work, is that like it's very scary, but ultimately it's empowering, and hoping that the messages that are being communicated reach other people, and other people feel seen, and other people feel more open to like be able to express themselves fully. Because I was scared and did this thing, so that way maybe they will be less scared in the future, and that thing feels less I don't know, questionable, or isn't thought of in the same kind of ways anymore. But yeah, it is scary.
Thank you. Alicia, the figures and scenes in your paintings seem so familiar. Are these characters from your own experience, your imagination, or both?
Most of the characters in this series are actual people that I've photographed, witnessed. I do take liberties with some of the things, but for the most part, the people and the figures in this series are all people that I've seen or have come across while attending a car show or a cruise. And I think what's interesting to me is when you attend a car show or a cruise, most people are looking at the cars. They're fascinated with the cars, and for me, I'm just fascinated with the people. I'm fascinated with the people that are there, because it's all ages, you know, from little kids all the way up to older people, women, men, everything is there. I think that the people that attend, and actually in all my practice and all my work, I think I'm just fascinated with people and how they are and what they're doing and how they're dressed, and And I think about colors and I think about textures when I plan my compositions and what I'm going to do with the background. But yeah, most of the people that I see or that are in this series are people that I just run into that I'm around when I just so happen to be at the show or whatever.
Thank you. Okay, so another group question. Rasquachismo has been presented in a few different iterations now. Were you all familiar with each other's works, or you met at this show?
I was familiar with Juliana's work, but I wasn't familiar with these gentlemen's work. It was new to me.
How about you, Juliana?
I was at least partially familiar with everybody's work. Alicia, myself, and Jose all went to Cal State Fullerton for our master's programs at different times, but I think there was a little bit of either overlap or, you know, idea of like, oh yeah, I've heard of this person, I've like seen one of their shows. And I most definitely have been familiar with Aaron's work. I was his professor at Santa Ana College. And so, yeah, I've seen his growth as an artist, and yeah, was familiar with his work before.
You can put an asterisk next to all my work. Have her name there.